So good morning, everyone. My name is Elisa Hanley. I am the Pupil Transportation Branch Manager for the Kentucky Department of Education. We are recording this today. We do know that our friends in Western Kentucky, many are not able to make it today, so we want to make sure that we are able to provide them the information that they can come back to later. In addition, many of you may have to go in and out for other meetings, and we understand that. So we will have this available to you in, I'm not going to guarantee this week, I'm going to say in a couple of weeks. I also know if you've attended in October, you have not received your ELA credits. We have a new person starting later this week, and I will be showing her how to do ELA credits so that she can get those certificates out to you for October and for this training. So, welcome. And thank you for everything that you guys do, and thank you all for stepping up to help our friends in Western Kentucky. The outpouring of support has been nothing but amazing. So today we are going to talk about maintenance and garage needs and costs. And I have the Transportation Director, Wayne Winters from Crittenden County, and Diane Winters, the Finance Officer with Crittenden County. And they'll talk to you about things that you need to know and how to work together to get those items that are needed and how to assess your garages for what the needs are. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and bring on Wayne Winters.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start out just really briefly about some of the stuff that's happening in Western Kentucky before we get into the presentation. Alyssa will share her screen here in just a minute, but you know, it's no secret Western Kentucky and Central Kentucky and Bowling Green and other areas were hit with storms over the weekend and this past week. And Mayfield Independent Schools down in Mayfield lost their bus garage and their fleet of buses. Right now, the superintendent there said in an interview yesterday or day before that, you know, school is getting the kids back in school is the least thing in his mind right now with all the devastation and things they've got going on there. But we do realize that when they are able to bring their students back into school, they're going to need buses. I sent out an email over the weekend and on Monday morning to some districts in Western Kentucky about if you've got an extra bus that you could spare to lease them or send down there that they're going to need some buses. So we think we've got that covered. I do want to mention I got an email this morning. There's a district that's actually going to donate them 2 buses. They were going to replace them this coming year and surplus them. So instead of selling them, they're going through their board motions now to donate them to Mayfield. So man, what a great group of people we're with. So I really appreciate that. And we'll be talking about that a little later. But today we are going to go over some things about your shop, about your transportation department and budget and the way that your transportation director needs to be able to meet with your finance officer and build those relationships for knowing and understanding the budget moving forward. If you do that now, that's awesome. If you don't, you really need to start. So you can see up on the screen now, shops then and now. What we had then is out of date now. And you'll see the old Sun machine there. And I could hook that up. When I started in the mechanic business, I had one of those. I could hook that up on an old straight 6-cylinder, and the monitor there on the left would show a heartbeat just about. I mean, it took the spark plug and it would tell you how they was running that engine. You could set your dwell with it and do everything you needed to make those things run their best. As you look down today, you see the computer and the box there that has to be hooked up. And a lot of the shops across Kentucky don't have the computers in the shop. I know we're one of those districts that's struggling to get all what we need in the shop and get the cables that we need and everything we need to diagnose the new buses. So, you know, I'm behind myself. So I know other districts are as well. I hear it from their technicians. How do we get this? What do we need to do with that? So one of the things we're going to talk about as we go through this, the needs of a shop are all in general the same, but must be catered to fit your shop. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about if you have 1 bus to 10 buses, you're going to need oil. We've got to do oil changes. We've got to have oil for those buses. But if you've got 10 buses, you may not want to buy a bulk oil. You may not want to have a bulk tank sitting out there with thousands of dollars of oil in it. You may want to buy oil by the case. So you've got to figure out what suits your shop. What's the best fit for your shop? So a district with 30 or 40 buses like Crittenden County and many of our other districts, we're not set up like Jefferson County. You know, Jefferson County is a beast. I mean, they've got buses, they've got multiple bays. The amount of things they need in Jefferson County is just mind blowing when we start thinking about it, as far as the number of computers they need to do inspections and be able to diagnose buses, the numbers of bays, the numbers of lift, the parts they go through on a daily basis. So we have to make sure that we set up our shop to suit our needs. And transportation directors, that's where you need to get with your finance officers. You need to let them know what you need. You need to get with your lead mechanics, your guys in the shop. Most of our transportation directors are in the area of the shop and facility where the buses are, so you know what you've got going on. For some of you that's not, spend a little more time over there in the next few months and find out for sure what your guys need to get modernized, to get into today's times and keep up. And if you have a bus, there's certain tools you will need and certain tools you must have. So today's takeaway, a couple of things. One is I want to make sure you have the information on how other districts are doing things, and to make sure that you know the must-have versus what would make it easier. So we're going to talk about some of that as we go. One of the other things that I want to mention right now is when you did your budget last year, you probably didn't prepare for the significant price increase we're seeing. So I talked to my tire supplier. Looks like if you didn't bid your tires, if you're just taking them off of the Kentucky bid sheet, you're probably going to see another 20% increase in January on some tires. I bid my tires every year, so July 1st through June 30th, my prices are locked in. So that's what I do to kind of help us. But not only for tires, we're seeing prices go up on our general parts. We're seeing a driver's seat. I ordered a driver's seat last year, paid $650 some for it. I ordered one last week, $1,200. So we're seeing those prices take a dramatic jump if you can even get parts. I tried to order some parts from International last week, nationwide back order. No idea when they're going to be here. So be prepared for that significant increase in parts prices, tire prices. Everything else is going to go up as we work through the next year or so, I'm afraid. So the shop in general, one of the things we need to start with is how many buses are in your fleet. If you've got 10 buses, 20 buses, 30 buses, 40 buses, 100 buses, 500 buses, 1,000 buses, that's the way you've got to set up your shop. Several years ago, Dave used to say their rule was you need one tech for every 16 to 20 buses. He would also say if your buses are newer, you may only need one tech for every 20 to 25 buses. But let's think about that just a little bit. And one of the things that I see in today's buses is now versus then. What I see when I opened up that 94 model bus in the breaker box in the box there to the left of the driver's compartment, we'd open it up, we'd see a few breakers, we'd see a few fuses, a positive wire run to a switch, we'd flip the switch, the light would come on. Today's buses, when you open that up, instead of being about 150 wires, there's probably 1,500 to 2,000 wires in there. They're all coded. You turn on a switch and it sends a signal through multiplex wiring to a relay that sends a signal over to an ECM or a body control module that sends another signal over to a relay to open up that sends a a certain ohm over to a relay to kick in a positive or negative wire to make that light come on. So today's diagnostics is much more difficult than they used to be on the older model buses. So in my personal opinion, I believe you need more techs now per bus than you did back then. So the other thing is the diagnostics. Nowadays, you've got to hook the computer up and go through the test and just a multitude of things to get to the problem, where a few years ago, it's pretty simple. If they was getting air and diesel fuel, you was probably going to run. So not the case today. It's much more complex. So you can see there's more time needed to diagnose buses. So the number of techs per bus, in my opinion, has changed as well. We talked about computers a little bit. Do the technicians in your shop have a computer? Are your inspections computer-based now? That's an option we have. We can either do it pencil and paper, or we can do it on computer. We do kind of a hybrid system here at Crittenden County. We keep all of our main inspections on the computer, but I don't have computers to go out and shop with my guys yet. So they're still doing a inspection form in a notebook where they document their mileage, the bus number, the tread depth, the brake readings on how much brake life is left on the disc brakes or the shoes, depending on the bus we're inspecting, any parts they use. And then when they get done with that, they bring it over to their workstation here in the shop, and they enter it into a program that I've got, which is through Traversa. That is a shop maintenance program that has allowed us to put our inventory in it. And that way, when they do the ticket on this program, the parts they use will actually get taken out of my inventory. And then it will go to a sheet to tell me I need more inventory of that certain item. So having that program allows us to track our inventory as well, which is another requirement KDE has. We're supposed to have our inventory in a system, in a program, so we can track it. And this program allows us to do that. So something else you need to think about: do you have a maintenance program that's allowing you to do that? So when we put these in, I went through an audit the other day. We come in, we pulled up the bus number. I can separate my buses by number and when it was inspected. Fairly easy to go through and see what was done to them. It didn't pull each report quite the way the auditor wanted it, but we was able to get through it and find the information he needed. So just be sure that you're tracking that some way, and all of your information on your buses, starting with your new bus check-in, is cradle to grave plus 1 year. So if you've got a bus and you've had it for 25 years and you get rid of it tomorrow, 1 year from tomorrow, you can get rid of that bus folder. Cradle to grave plus 1 year on your bus folder and all your paperwork. So be sure, however you're doing that, that's the way you're keeping up with it. Again, the computers are something we need in the future for technicians in the shop. Each technician probably needs a computer. I know that's tough, but that's where we're at. That's what we're looking at. That's what we're moving forward. What we're going to need to have, there's information that you can get from the dashboard of a bus, but it's not what we need. We need more information than that. And we have the ability to do the inspections on a computer base now. So if the technicians and inspectors have got that computer, they can do their work on there and get it as they go and save a little time there as well. Plus, they can diagnose the bus if they need to while they're there with that computer. Are you prepared? Do you have inventory you need? When you think about inventory, again, you need to think about the number of buses you have. Here in Crittenden County, and I'll talk about that because that's where I'm at. That's what I'm geared for. We've got 30 buses. So the amount of inventory I keep is going to be different than what Jefferson County needs. The amount of inventory I keep is going to be different than what McCracken County needs. Again, it depends on the number of buses you have. I try to keep parts in stock here. This past year, if my superintendent looks at my budget, he's going to be knocking on my door because my budget's going to be up this year. But I saw a problem coming 6, 8, 9 months ago, and some of the parts I only kept 1 or 2 of on the shelf. I may have 3 or 4 of on the shelf now because I know I'm going to have trouble getting them. And as I use the one part off, I order another part to replace it. I'm having trouble getting my parts now. So those parts that I only had one or two of that I've got three or four of now, I've still got enough to get me through the next few months if I have problems with them, but I'm still not getting my parts in to replace them yet. So I tried to stock up a little more because I thought there was going to be a parts availability problem, and there was. The other reason I stocked up a little bit more, I seen the prices going up. So I tried to get a few more of the items I needed at a cheaper price, and the prices did go up. Camera systems. The camera systems I use is an REI system. They was cost us about $2,800 a piece for the system I use with the what I call the cat eye camera that really is nice inside the bus to be able to see what's going on. The stop arm cameras on it, the hard drives, the discs that go in it, the SD cards. Priced them the other day, they went up to about $3,300. So everything we're ordering has seemed like it's went up. So that's something you probably need to talk to your finance officer about if you haven't. And I know there's finance officers in here, so that's something we need to be looking at with our transportation directors. What do we see in our budget? How are we going to cover those costs moving forward? I know this year we've got some ESSER funds and some other things that we got to help compensate for some funds we lost. But I also remember last year or the year before, SEEK was cut, and they put some funds in that place to help get us through that year. Those funds are probably still cut, so we're not going to see that as we get out of the ESSER funds that we've had that's kind of built up to help us compensate the next couple of years. So, you know, we have to look forward into the future 3, 4, 5 years to see where we're at and where we're going. I know there's some things on the table to possibly help fund SEEK funding at a higher rate than what we're getting now. That would really help transportation departments and school districts be able to fund the transportation departments. So rising costs in the future is going to be a problem for us. So we need to be thinking about that now. In your shop, how many bays do you have? Again, over the years, there was three districts that didn't have a shop yet. I want to think, I don't know if Carl's on here or not, but if he is, he may know. I wanted to think that everybody that was inspecting buses did have a shop now. So your shop, again, needs to be built to fit your transportation department. So again, like a Jefferson County, multiple shops, multiple bays, it's just an animal within itself up there, the way they bring their buses in and do them. But a district that's got 100, 200 buses like a Henderson or McCracken County, you know, trying to think, I think Henderson, I don't know if Wes is on here, but I think they've got like a 4-bay shop, if I remember right, and maybe a bay to come in on the back. I have not seen McCracken County's new shop, so I assume it's a fairly nice shop. Their old shop, they had really outgrown it. So again, your shop needs to accommodate your fleet size. And when you're thinking about that, you need to think about your lift. Do you have a bus lift? If you don't have a bus lift, it's not impossible to do oil changes and do your inspections, but it makes it really difficult on your inspector and your technician to work on those buses because they're having to lay on their back either on a creeper or on the ground in some cases to get under those buses. And it makes it difficult to be able to see the things they need to see, and difficult sometimes to do the job they need to do under the bus with the air dryers and the air lines and the electrical systems and the stuff they have to deal with under the bus. So you need to make sure that when you're looking at your shop needs, that lifts are something you look at. There's a couple different scenarios for lifts. Some of the lifts are in-ground hydraulic, air overhead hydraulic, good lift system. Others are like we bought a few years ago, and they're the mobile lifts where you slide a little unit under each wheel on the bus. There's 4 units, and you slide them under it. They're linked together, and they'll raise the bus up and down. So we use those. We've been really happy with those. They're a good fit for some shops. Others are not. So again, you have to decide what shop you have, what you need to fit your specific shop. So we talked about computers a little bit ago. I've got it on the list again. Does each tech have a computer? That is something you need to think about as we move forward. The buses, the last 10 years in general, have been going more and more electronic. And believe me when I say they're there now, they are electronic now. And we really need those computers in shops. And again, I'm one of those that's working on getting what I need here because I don't have it. I'm still in the century behind with some of the cables I've got trying to run systems. And I had the old Service Max system on an old computer that I had here. And the cable I had was really old, but it worked on all my buses that I had, with the exception of my propane buses, which takes a different system too. But that cable worked for us up until this year, and the old computer crashed. So when I talked to International, I said, well, reload Service Max. It's still the baseline, still a free upload on software. So we did, but the problem is the cable I've got won't work with the new program. So now I'm in a position where no one can get me that cable because it's an exit cable and they're on nationwide back order. So we've run into that problem the last 6 months where I don't have a cable that's compatible with my software to be able to diagnose my buses. So giving us a little bit of a problem. And again, that's what we're going to see moving forward if we don't try to get this under control now in the shops that need to be updated a little bit. Do you have wireless internet in your shop? You know, if you're going to have your technicians with their computers, that's something you're going to have to think about. They need wireless internet so they don't have to have cables strung out all over the shop trying to hook up the computers. So we did get that this year. So we've got that in our shop now ready for our computers to go out and our laptops. And I've got one laptop right now. Probably going to try to get another one. I've got 2 technicians that work the floor pretty regular. So we need a couple of them out there. One to do diagnosis and inspections, the other one so they can keep up with the paperwork. Do you have the diagnostic software the tech needs to do their jobs? And in some cases, it's going to be different for the bus. Here in Crittenden County, we've got Bluebirds, we've got Thomas's, and we've got Internationals. I buy some of all 3. Several years ago, one of my technicians, I kind of made a joke to him, you know, if we could take all 3 buses and build one bus with all their positive characteristics, we could start a new bus company called the Perfect Bus. You know, there's things I like about each bus, and there's some things that I'd rather see a little different on each bus. So we buy all 3. We're pretty satisfied with all 3 buses. One of the things is service. You got to try to figure out where you can get buses worked on and what best works for your shop as far as the bus you buy. Tools. Let's talk just a minute about mandatory tools versus tools that you really need. So as directors, you may know this already, but as finance officers, you may not. One of the things when I do trainings for inspectors and when I talk to technicians, when I go to other shops, if I'm doing a training there, and I go in respect to doing a training for KDE, one of the things I ask to look for when I get to that shop is, where do you keep your tires? And I ask to see their torque wrench. And it's surprising. Some shops know exactly where the torque wrench is. Others may not. The ones that know where it is, they've been using theirs. The ones that may not, I have to wonder. So a torque wrench is something that your shop has to have. There's no way around it. Our inspections require us, starting with a new bus inspection, to check torques on a bus. Every D inspection requires us to check torques on a bus. Every tire we change requires us to torque the lug nuts on the bus. So your shop must have a torque wrench. May need more than one. The torque wrench that you need to torque your wheel studs, wheel nuts at 450 foot-pounds may need to be a bigger torque wrench. The torque wrench you need to torque your U-bolts on the bus at 600 foot-pounds also needs to be a bigger torque wrench. Then when you get into your smaller things around the engine compartment, other areas that you're going to need to torque, might need to be a smaller torque wrench because the torque demands aren't that big. So a torque wrench is one of the things that you have to have. Wheel lifts. if you're doing wheels and tires in your shop, you need to have one of the little wheel lists that helps the mechanic get that tire on and off. I'm on up in age, and I'm just going to tell you, it's not as easy as it used to be for me to get a hold of a wheel and tire and get it on and off the bus or on and off the big truck. So get those wheel lists for them. They need it to put wheels on. The drum dolly, that's something else when they're doing a brake job. A lot of guys in the shop want to grab that drum and pull it off and set it down. That back will only stand so much of that. If you want to take care of your guys and keep them around for a while, they need a drum dolly. Here in Crittenden County, we started buying air disc brakes back several years ago when they came available on school buses. I've been in the trucking industry for 35, 36 years. I was in the industry when they first came out with disc brakes on the trucks 15, 20 years ago. It was a really good theory back then, but no one knew how to work on them when they got out on the road, so it created a lot of problems for trucking companies, so we stayed away from them. When I had the availability to buy them on a school bus, it's all I want. I think they're great for school buses. They really help with braking performance. But again, if you have those disc brakes on your buses in your district, a disc brake dolly is something you're going to need. We just bought one a couple weeks ago. Gray Manufacturing makes a great one. I think they're about $2,500, $2,600. But again, it's something you're going to need in your shop if you're running disc brakes on your school buses. Some shops do their own tire changing. If you mount and dismount your tires, do you have the equipment to do it with? And we're going to talk about tires here in just a few minutes again. I've got another section here at the bottom. So let's go on to multiplex wiring versus positive and negative wiring. Again, guys, I talked about it just a little bit earlier. Your older school buses, your early 90s on up through about 94, 95, had the old, what I call positive negative wiring. Just the old basic. If you wanted the light to come on, you put 12 volts to it. Nowadays, the multiplex wiring, and again, when you flip a switch, it reads a certain ohm, and it sends a signal to a relay, which sends a signal to a body control module, which sends a signal to the ECM, which sends another signal back over to a relay to let the juice come to the light to come on. So it's not what it used to be. The multiplex wiring is a lot more complex. You're going to need some electrical tools to do some diagnosing with on that. One of the probes, I think it's called a Monitor 2000 that we use here that I bought several years ago for myself. I brought it into the shop here that we're using. It really allows us to do several things. One is it will allow me to test relays. The other one is it's a system that I can hook up to my battery and trace for a short in a wire. It'll allow me to trace that out, tell me which direction the short's in, and allow me to do that. So you need to be sure you're geared up in your shop for that. Your technicians can kind of share with you what you need on that. Oil. Do you have a bulk tank? Some shops need it, some don't. If you're running just a few buses, maybe you're going to buy your oil by the case or by the barrel, and you don't have to have a bulk tank. Other shops need that bulk tank. We're running about 30 buses here in Crittenden County and 7 board vehicles. So we've got a bulk tank. One of the things that I'm looking at right now, and I don't know how costly it's going to be. They're actually doing a quote now. We are going to put some recoil cords in the center of our bays that go over to our oil tank, our antifreeze, and our washer fluid, something they use on every inspection, or may need to use in every inspection they do on a bus. They may need to top off the antifreeze. They may need to top off that washer fluid tank. And if they do an oil change or need to add oil, instead of having to pull out a hose from one side of the shop to the other, it's going to be right there at the bay at their convenience to make it a lot easier for them. Do you have a fueling site? Do you bid your fuel each year? Fluids, do you buy bulk? One of the things I talked to one of my vendors about the other day, washer fluid. He tried to order some more cases of washer fluid, and he's like, oh, not available, not available. not available. So now it looks like we're going to have a problem getting some washer fluid. I did talk to one of my suppliers that I buy diesel from, and he said they had a few 50-gallon barrels there at his shop of just the regular 20 below washer fluid. So I may look at buying a barrel of that to try to get us through the next, it probably lasts us over a year. But the problem is if I don't, and it becomes where I can't get it, then I'm not going to have washer fluid to put my buses through the winter. So that could be a problem. The other thing we're going to talk about again for a minute is tires. And I just wanted to bring this up again because there's been a lot of confusion over the years about recaps. If your district runs recaps, be sure you're doing that log on your casings. And again, your computer, your technician needs a computer to do that. It just make it a lot easier for them to be able to do because they need to know the number, the identification number on that casing if you don't brand them. And I think there was only one district in Kentucky that was actually branding their tires. And everybody else that was using recaps, I think, was trying to track it through casing ID numbers that DOT requires them to have. And when you're doing that, you also need to write down or track how old that casing is because you can't run a casing with a recap when you put it on the bus or when you have it capped and get it back. It can't be over 5 years old. So you need to be able to track that. Now, once you put that retread on your bus, you can run on out for a while longer than that. Again, but we're trying to get everybody to understand about a 10-year lifespan on a tire is about all you want to look at. So, but you cannot cap it if it's over 5 years old. Do you mount and balance your own tires? Here at Crittenden County, we do not. Again, I don't run recaps here at Crittenden County either. So that's one of the things that I just I get a casing credit for my casings, and the difference between the casing credit I get and the new tires I buy over the years just hadn't been enough for me to want to run recaps on the back of my buses. So we haven't started that. Not that it's out of the question. I don't know what the price of tires is going to do. If the price of tires goes up too much, I'll have to revisit that. And the last thing I've got on this before we go into the next presentation, future budget for upgrades in the shop. That's something else you need to think about moving forward. You know, like your torque wrench, like your wheel dollies. Some of those things with age, they get older and they unfortunately wear out. So you need to talk about that, or you need to talk about that with your finance officer to make sure you look for tool replenishing, tool supplies and stuff that's coming in the future. At this time, I'm going to look back at some questions here and try to see.
This is Elisa.
Okay.
If anyone has questions, you are more than welcome to unmute at this time. Please raise your hand and we can call on you. Couple of things that Carl referenced is that all the garages that are not using third parties, all districts that are not using third parties for their work do have garages. However, we have several that are undersized or inadequate for the fleets. And remember, you have to consider health and safety of the garage as well. Garages get old. Our buses have gotten longer over the years. So is the bus fitting in the garage? You know, is the garage safe? You know, they have to still follow OSHA requirements or Kentucky OSHA requirements as well. So those are things to consider. And is your shop missing anything? Go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, and again, you know, that's one of the things we have to think about is our shop in general and what's the condition of your shop. I know that's one of the reasons McCracken County had gotten into a position where their shop was getting really old and their lift messed up and they didn't have room to add to the area they needed to get their lift fixed. So they was looking at building a school. So they decided to go ahead and move their shop and redo it. So, you know, that's something that you have to look at and consider as you're moving forward. Justin asked the question, do you send text to any type of training such as Cummins for Insight software or training provided by the three main bus manufacturers. Is this part of your fiscal budget? We have not sent anyone to a specific training. I know International has what they call their university, and I think it's out in Tulsa, if I'm not mistaken. I think Thomas has something as well down in Carolina. One of the things that we do, and we have not done it the last 2 years, is the Kentucky Technicians Association, which I've got the reins of that right now. We try to have that in Elizabethtown each year. The community college over there that hosts that for us was not able to allow us in there the last couple of years. We are looking at that now. I work with, it'll be Boyd Supply now, the Thomas buses, with Mark Cahill and Bluegrass International buses, and with Mark Parsons and Bluebird Central States Bus. The three of those companies have helped over the last several years put that together and put that on over at Elizabethtown. And they have some training. Each one of them have classes at that each year. We try to send that information out. It's really a good training. And the last several years that we've done that, it started out many years ago there at Somerset, and then it went to Bowling Green. And then the last 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years, it's been at Elizabethtown. We'll probably continue at Elizabethtown just due to it being centrally located. There is no cost to the school district to send your technician to that 3-day training. The only thing you're out is their hotel bill and their mileage to get there. So that's the training I try to make sure my guys go to. Not to say that somewhere in the future I wouldn't send them to a training class specialized for an International or Bluebird or Thomas. One of the things as we move forward, we got to think about what fuel systems are going to be available for us. And with some of the regulations I'm seeing, alternate fuel is going to be the way of the future at some point. We done a demo on an electric bus here a few weeks ago, and guys, I just don't know that may end up being our future before it's over. I know the diesel engines are having a tough time meeting emissions, and I'm seeing some places that's trying to get diesel engines off the road out in the far west. So anyway, we'll have to see how that goes. But those are things specifically like the propane and the electric. I definitely will have to have technicians go to those classes to become more up to date with that. Carl did say that Cummins, Bluebird, and Thomas and IC all have excellent training programs, and I think he's talking about it at their sites. I would assume, and I may be wrong, but I would assume Bluebird is probably down by their plant in Georgia. Thomas, I'm gonna think it's over in North Carolina, and I think International is out in Tulsa, if I'm not mistaken. But again, Carl can help me there if I am mistaken on that. And then there's a question about it went away. Let me see. Do you have any type of formula justifying large repairs on buses that will be soon surplus? For instance, I have a bus that needs about $3,000 in repairs, and the bus will be surplus this year. You know, unfortunately, I run into those situations myself, and it seems like every year, long about May, I am struggling to keep buses on the road. It's that long stretch from January to the end of school where we're really running the buses hard, and I get down to sometimes my last bus. If one more bus has a problem, we're not going to be able to get the kids transported. So, you know, what I try to do, and I've got one bus out here now that I took off the books because it was going to need about $4,000 to $5,000 in repairs, and that bus was one I'm going to take out of the system next year. So to answer that question on that $3,000 repair, if I think there's any way I can make it to the end of the year without that bus, I'm not going to spend $3,000 of my district's money to repair a bus that I know I'm going to surplus at the end of the year. So again, you've kind of got to use that rule of thumb of what size is your fleet, what your demands for your buses. If that's a bus that you think you can get by without having to use for the rest of the year, I'm not going to do anything other than just general maintenance to keep that bus on the road. Now, obviously, if it's a brake chamber, I'm going to put a pair of brake chambers on it to get it there. But again, depending on your fleet size is what I would try to go by if I was going to spend the money to keep that bus going to the end of the year. Again, if I knew it was one I was going to take out of service at the end of the year.
Laura has a question.
And Kentucky Technician Association in Elizabethtown. There's also a training through national organizations that are available, and we will get that information out to you. Matter of fact, I'll make a note here in just a second to try to get some of that information shared with the transportation directors and send out an email on trainings if they're interested in that. And I think someone else had a question. Someone's had their hand up. Alyssa?
Oh, I don't see any hands up. Wait, there was someone that had a question. It says, Laura, you can unmute if you'd like, if you have a question that you haven't put in.
Yes, thank you. So I'm very new to this. I'm finance and operations, so I do oversee our transportation, but I'm at Model App, and so we don't have a bus garage. We got a lot of buses out there because, you know, we're also in CSEP territory over here with our Army Depot, so we got to get out of Dodge, you know, when we can. But, and so Madison County, we work with them. They come and inspect our buses and other things like that. But since I'm new to this, maybe this is not the place or time, and if you can direct me, but you know, I graduated in 91. Okay. So I'm of the time, remember when we used to have the 16 passenger buses, vans and stuff. And I understand why those were junked and people said no more transportation, you know, on those. But with the issues that we're having is even in a district like ours, you know, I'm very fortunate to have the few, like handful of bus drivers that I do have, but it is so hard getting new bus drivers. Is the state looking at or anything to where some the newer they're not buses, but they're not vans per se, like the Ford Transports and other things like that, just where we are having such issues with bus drivers that is there any way that would become, you know, especially when you have those small teams like the golf team, they only have like 4 or 5 kids sometimes, you know, that you're taking places and everything. So I'm just curious about whether that will ever, you know, be a possibility, especially to help out some of the smaller districts that we just, I'm never going to have 30 buses, you know, or a big bus garage or anything like that. And we're just trying to keep our head above water to get our kids where they need to be for all of their, you know, extracurriculars. So I'm just curious.
You know, and Alyssa's on here and Carl's on here as well. So what we have in place right now through KDE is they do allow a board vehicle such as a 9-passenger or less to be used in certain situations to transport those teams when it's necessary, such as a golf team. What KDE does not allow, and Alyssa, please follow up when I get done talking, what they do not allow is they do not allow you to transport students to and from school in that 9-passenger or less vehicle. They want those students transported in a school bus because of safety issues. So Alyssa, if you would, please follow up on that.
Yes, so 702 KAR 5, and I'm going to pull it up right now just to make sure I have the right one, 5130. Provide you with the requirements of using 9 passengers or less and when you can use those. So if you have any specific questions, you can certainly reach out to us directly. You can reach out to myself or Joe Shepard and we'll be happy to answer your questions. As model lab, I'm not quite sure how that really falls in, so it's really specific, and we'll have to look up if that's a state school or if that's a county school. So we've got a lot of things that we'll have to look at for you, but we can certainly help you with those questions. Okay, it looks like someone else has their hands raised as well. Vanita, go ahead. You can unmute. Vanita, if you have a question, you can unmute. Okay, you can continue.
All right, guys. We're going to talk just a little bit. My wife's here and in the room with me. She's our finance officer here at Crittenden County. So she does a good job presenting, but she does not like to present. So she's asked me if I would go through this presentation for you. And again, you know, both these presentations today, both the things we're talking about, is both transportation director and finance officer. Some of the stuff in the first thing I talked about, transportation directors had the idea of what was going on there. Maybe finance officers didn't. This presentation I'm going to share with you now for a few minutes. Finance officers, you got this down to a science, but we're trying to make sure our transportation directors understand some of the things and some of the responsibilities. I know as new guys come on, if they've been in a company or a place before where they had to do PO numbers, they're a little bit familiar with that. But when it comes to model procurement, or if you happen to be one of the few districts under bid law, they don't know what's going on when we talk about that. So we try to make sure when we talk to even inspectors and technicians that they understand a little bit about that. So this next presentation is going to talk just a little bit about that. So as we get started, it's basically some of the things that transportation, what do you need to know? So the next slide, please.
Really quick, Shannon had a question before we move on to the next topic, if you don't mind. Shannon, you can go ahead and unmute.
Wayne or Lisa, either one of y'all, I would like for you to repeat what you said about the 9-passenger van and under, about transporting students on a regular basis.
Okay, so right here in the law, and this is all in 702 KR 5030, okay, it specifically tells you when you can and cannot utilize the vehicle, okay? It is not for, let's see, where is it? These are the only times that you can use it. It's not for day-to-day transportation to and from school. So if you have specific questions, please reach out to me, because we would like to really have this presentation for.
That's fine. I wanted to make sure that I heard that statement and that I will reach out to you. That's all I have to do before we continue. Thank you. Thank you, Wayne.
You're absolutely welcome.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So again, this presentation was kind of geared from Crittenden County because it's what we are and what we know on numbers and stuff. So in Crittenden County, we've got 200 full-time employees, 50 part-time and substitute employees. We've got 3 schools here. We've got our elementary school, our middle school, and our high school. We year to year average around 1,400 students, including preschool. We hold around 30 to 35 buses, depending on where we're at with those. Right now we're at about 30, and we've got 7 board vehicles. So why is it important to know how many board vehicles you've got? If you use a board vehicle that will transport a student, for instance, a student at school gets sick and somebody from the Frisky or whatever program you have at your school that helps with daily things around the school, they're going to take that child home. They could use a board vehicle to do that. That constitutes an emergency situation, and they could do that. But that vehicle has to be inspected by a state certified inspector before we can use that vehicle to transport a student. You can't just transport a student in your personal vehicle, okay? So out of those 7 board vehicles, One of those is my service truck, which does not transport students. So we just keep maintenance up on it as normal. 2 of those are vehicles that our maintenance department uses. We do not transport students in those, so we do not do the 30-day inspection, the monthly inspection on those. We just keep maintenance up on those. 4 of those vehicles at any given time may transport a student, such as our golf team. We've got a van that we bought to allow our golf team to be able to travel and carry what they need in a secured area. So those vehicles must be inspected each month, just like your buses. So it's important to add those into your shop load. They have to be inspected. They have to be maintained in the same guidelines as your buses. There is a inspection form that's in SharePoint that you can use for those if you don't have one there at your shop that you've been using for those. So if you've just been using the A bus inspection and using the areas that apply to it, there's one that Alyssa put together a few years ago that may be just a little easier for you to use for the board vehicles. Next slide, please. So one of the things, directors, that we want to make sure you understand is some of the different cycles that we go through in the budget. And again, it's very important that you communicate with your finance officers. One of the biggest times is toward the end of the year. Around May, you really want to make sure you know where your budget is, because if you've got any excess money at all, they're trying to get POs closed out in June and get the end of the year done. So you want to make sure you get everything cleaned up toward the end of May to help them out. But the year's financial cycle, in January, they have to have a draft budget approved by the Board of Education. This does not get sent to KDE, but it's something that through model procurement laws that your board has to do. So that draft budget needs to be together by then. So it's important in November, December, you're talking to your finance officers and letting them know, hey, we may have a price increase on parts. We need to look at increasing our budget for repair items. The 0663 code, we may need more money in there for parts moving forward. So we want to make sure to look at that. Then in May, the tentative budget has to be approved. And that's when they are dialing it in a little bit more. They're having to get this where it needs to be. And this one has to be sent to KDE as well and approved by not only the local board, but by KDE. So it's important that you've got it dialed in really close by then. And then in September, the working budget has to be approved by the local board and KDE. So that's the 3 cycles they go through. Again, transportation directors, transportation staff, be sure you get with your finance officers to understand more about this in your district and the way your purchase orders and stuff flows in your district with your finance officer. Next slide, please. So when I'm trying to see what I've got available, I'm looking at my budget. And for those of you that know me, this is my grandson. He's looking over the budget there, and he's on the phone, and he thinks we found enough money to buy him a tractor. So you can see in the picture next to him, we did have, and we got him that tractor. So same way with your buses, same way with your parts. You've got to look, because we work with what I like to call a declining budget at the school system. We've got an allotment of money, and guys, unfortunately, when that money's gone, that money's gone. Occasionally, at the end of the year, it's hard to tell for sure where your seat's going to end up, especially in transportation. The last couple of years, there's been just a little extra money left from areas, and they've put that back into the transportation pot. That's why you'll see normally you're at about 60% of funding on your seat money, but it's been a little higher than that the last 2 years because there was a little extra money kicked back in on it. So hopefully we've got some legislation in place that's going to help us out there. Next slide, please. Communication. Directors, we know how important communication is with our bus drivers. with our technicians, it's just as vital, the link between the transportation director and the finance officers. You have to work with your finance officer. You have to communicate with your finance director every year about your budget, because they have so much going on in their department. They don't a lot of times understand everything that we do in transportation, and they may not know why we need an extra EGR system, EGR cooler laying on our shelf. That's going to be a $2,000 investment laying there, because why do you not just go get that when you need it? If I've got a bus the EGR goes down on and the cooler goes out, and I call International and they say, oh, that's on nationwide back order, instead of that bus being up and running again within a few days, that bus could be down for months. So, you know, you need to be able to explain why you keep the inventory you keep and why your budget's where it's at. So once you help explain that to your finance director, your finance officer, then together sit down with your superintendent so they can understand the budget as well when they talk to the Board of Education. And you may be asked to go to a working session and share at some point throughout the year. And that's a great opportunity. And one of the things that I'll say right here is, be sure when you get the opportunity to share with your Board of Education in a working session, preferably, because the working session is not usually televised, there's not usually public there. Talk about the SEEK funding on depreciation of these buses and the importance of rotating your fleet out that 15th, 16th year and getting a new bus back in to keep that money coming in on the front side of SEEK. Because the first 2 to 3 years of that SEEK funding is your bigger money on depreciation for those new buses when you do your depreciation. So be sure your board knows about depreciation and the schedule on that, and share that with them. Make sure the finance department works with you on purchasing. One of the things that the finance department will talk to you about sometimes is blanket POs. You know, and again, it depends on your district as to how you're set up where you're purchasing parts from. So be sure you get with your finance officers on that. Communicate with the payroll department. You know, here in Crittenden County, one of the things we do, we're like the 26 or so square miles, largest square mile district in Kentucky, even though we only transport 1,400, or we have 1,400 students, we don't transport that many. We are the least densely populated per square mile, or at least we was, I hadn't looked this year, of any district in Kentucky. So we cover more miles to pick up one student than any other district in Kentucky. So some of my routes are 4-hour routes, some of my routes are 4.5-hour routes, some of my routes are 5-hour routes. When I hire someone now, I hire everyone at 4 hours. That way, if their route grows, I can add time to their timesheet each week. If their route decreases, I can take them back down to what they was hired in on a contract at 4 hours. It works good for us. Not sure how you do it in your area, and I'm not trying to tell you how to do it in your area, but what I am saying is transportation directors work with your finance department and your payroll department to make sure you're at what best accommodates your district. Next slide. Again, on communication, your budget can change every year depending on routes, repairs, staff, and the age of your fleet. So, you know, again, in your district, you know what you've got. You know if your buses are getting older. You know the repairs they're going to need. You know if you've got a bus that's, and here in Crittenden County, I've got buses that are still 20, 22, 23 years old. And if I see that bus has got some repairs that are going to be significant, I may want to think about what I'm going to spend on that bus. Do I really want to put another set of tires on that bus if it's getting to that point? If that bus is what I'm going to call end of life. We're setting 5 months from the end of school. Christmas break's coming up for about everyone. So we're 5 months out from the end of school. If I've got a bus that that I know is going to be, this is this last year, it's done after this year, do I really want to spend that money on it? Again, like the question a while ago about, do I want to spend $3,000 on a bus that I'm going to, is the end of life is somewhere around the end of May. So that's a question you've got to answer within your district. Are you going to have that bus to transport your students? If not, I'm not going to make those repairs. Does the finance officer understand these things? Again, guys, that's why it's important to share with your finance officers why you need the extra money for repairs, why you need the extra staff if you do need extra staff. Be sure they understand the age of your fleet. Be sure they understand the depreciation. You know, a lot of times, and one of the first times I talked about depreciation in front of some of my board members and myself, when I sat in a conference in Louisville, Kentucky, 13, 14 years ago, and Dave Magnum said something about depreciation, I just kind of thought to myself, well, we don't pay taxes at our school. We're tax exempt, so depreciation is not going to help us any there. I've also got a farm. Depreciation to me means when I buy that tractor, I get to take all my taxes each year and help me out on my taxes. Well, the school don't pay taxes, so why am I worried about depreciation? It's totally different, even though it's uniquely the same. So be sure that everyone, including your board, understands that and understands that chart. And again, that's a KRS. It's in the KRSs, and we can share that with you as well. Start the conversations in February for the tentative budget. Again, when that budget goes out in May, it's one that the board and the state has to sign off on. So be sure that you're sharing this information with your finance officers, and probably by that March or April, you're wanting to sit down with your superintendent to make sure he understands it as well, or she understands it, depending on which superintendent. But they need to know, because ultimately they're responsible for the district, and when they get asked a question, it helps if they understand what's going on as well. When someone asks, why'd you buy another new bus? Times are tough, and man, you know, I just don't understand. You know, you say the school district hurt for money, but you bought another new bus. Why? Well, our general public don't understand it. We get funded 124% the cost of that new bus over a period of 14 years. You know, some of our superintendents may not know that. We need to make sure they do. We need to make sure our board knows that. We need to make sure our finance officers knows that. So those are reasons we have these conversations. And again, the finalize in August for the working budget. At that point, it's what I'm gonna call etched in stone. Not that it can or won't change, but they sure don't want it to. So next slide, please. Transportation funding seat calculation. If you've been following along with these sessions over this past year, I talk about seat funding occasionally. One of my favorite things was over the years was to go to Che Ritter's classes when he talked about seat, because I really enjoyed him sharing a presentation on that. And this past year, we've got a young man that's been sharing with us about seat funding and breaking it down a little more for us to help understand it. And he's done a great job as well. So I'm not going to go into the explanation of seat funding. I'm just going to tell you seat funding comes through a huge formula of things. And when one number changes, the outcome changes. And there's so many calculations and so many differences that goes into this formula. It makes it really difficult to explain and understand if you're not going to just do a session on this calculation. So if you hadn't been through those sessions, I'm sure maybe we'll get Jody to present it at KEPT or STAC on seat funding, and maybe you can attend that. There's some past sessions Alyssa's got probably the presentations on. So again, very important to understand seat funding. And the only thing I'll say about that is depreciation on buses. Again, remember, 124% the cost of the bus over 14 years is a reason we want to keep buying new buses when our buses start aging out.
And Wayne, this is Elisa. We do have those previous ones recorded as well. So
yeah, so if you hadn't seen those, guys, it would pay you to to watch those because it was a great presentation. Next slide, please. One of the most important things as transportation directors we can do to ensure that we're getting the proper funding is T codes. And depending on your district and how they're set up, there's not much way around your staff having to, and when I say your staff at different districts, it's different. The bookkeepers, the people that's enrolling our students, that's working with this, needs to make sure they take care of T codes when they're enrolling that student if they're going to be transported. One of the things as transportation directors or transportation staff that we need to go back and look at is we need to make sure of that 1 mile. Now, we've got our elementary campus that's located just a little over 1 mile from our middle school and high school campus. So if I've got a student that's going from my middle school, high school over to my elementary school because mom works over there, most of the time they put them in under 1 mile. It is over 1 mile. I take my service truck, I stop where my bus is parked, I drive to the destination where they're dropped off. It's either 1 mile or under, or it's over 1 mile. If it's over 1 mile, they're a T1. If it's under 1 mile, they're a T2 or T3 or 4, depending on if it's once a day or twice a day. Guys, several years ago, we were audited, and the lady that come in wanted to know why we changed some of the codes from the kids that were being transported school to school. Did you move your school? No, we did not move our school. There was a misunderstanding that they thought the schools were less than 1 mile apart. In reality, we're transporting our students over 1 mile. She got in the truck, we drove it. They understood at the end it was over 1 mile and we were all good. So I say that to say this. You have to know in Crittenden County, and again, goes back to your district, in Crittenden County, we transport pre-K through 12 on the same bus. Special needs students ride our regular buses. So if I've got a bus and I load a child at the elementary school and we come over to the high school and load there and then we go on our route, even though that child may live less than 1 mile from our elementary school, they're being transported over 1 mile. So we have to make sure we understand and we watch where these students are transported, especially with your town kids. I know Henderson, they've got kids that live close to the school. So they have to pay attention. Are these students transported over 1 mile or not? Now, don't do something crazy like keep your kids on the bus and drive by their house to let kids off and then drive back and let them off and say, well, there's on the bus over 1 mile, I get to go T1. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about realistically if it's over that mile. If your district hadn't been audited, you may be in the future. They're looking at this stuff now. So again, just be sure you're putting them, you're getting your codes correct. Be sure you're understanding if that child's transported over 1 mile or under 1 mile and double check that. The other thing is your T5 codes. You get 5 times the money for a T5 as you do a T1. So if you've got a child that has an IEP that has transportation, we need to make sure that they're coded in your system as a T5. Those are things that is going to equate to your bottom line on SEEK funding. So be sure you're trying to track that. Be sure you're keeping up with that. All right, next slide, please.
Hold on one second. There's a T code question. Is it a mile distance turn by turn or a mile radius? He's heard both.
We were told as the tire turns. So, and for instance, and I'll give you an example. If we took a pen and stuck it in a map at our elementary school and we draw a circle and that child lived within 1 mile, there's a creek that runs through between my elementary school and one of my subdivisions, and I physically can't get them there because of the creek. So I have to go over 1 mile to get to that. And we were told if that tire turned over 1 mile, that we was over 1 mile on our T codes. So again, don't drive the bus over a mile to get to a house that's within a mile. But if you leave your school and you go a safe route to that home and it's over a mile, we've been coding T1. If it's under a mile or less, then we're coding a T2, or again, a T3 or 4, depending on if you arrive once a day or twice a day.
And if you have very specific questions, your auditor, I believe your auditor from the finance area will be able to help you with that as well.
One of the things that we want to be sure we work with our finance department on as we move forward is bidding and ways to save money. And it takes time to do tire bids and fuel bids and repair parts and the different things that we do in transportation each year to try to bid. But in the end, it saves money. And guys, sometimes it's worth the time to go that extra mile to get those tire bids. And I'll give you, for instance, Goodyear is on the state contract pricing list. Okay. The state has took that time to work with that vendor and get their bid in and get them set up. So we don't have to bid that. We can use them because they're on the state master agreement. Okay. But flip side is, and I had this happen to me, I had 2 Goodyear dealers. They were different companies, but they were both Goodyear tire dealers. Both of them bid me Goodyear tires. They came in almost $100 difference per tire. One of the guys really did his homework, got the price of state bid down. Their cost to mount and dismount was cheaper. Their cost, they didn't charge me to deliver. Their casing price was $10 higher per casing than the other one. So it made a difference of about $100 a tire for me that year. Now, since then, it's been a lot closer. But let's just take this year, for instance. If you're buying off the state bid price in January or February, expect to see about a 20% increase on Goodyear tires. It's coming. I talked to my supplier the other day. I had a question about if I'd seen costs go up. So I done a little checking with some others where I might not see that cost go up until my next bid cycle. But he told me that they had already had about a 14% increase this past year. I saw that on my bids, but there's a 20% increase coming first of the year. So again, bidding really has helped us out. It helps lock us in for that year, and then we go from there. Saving money by combining special needs and preschool students on regular buses. When I came here 12 years ago, we run separate buses for a lot of things. I had a special needs bus that was leaving here and on the road for 2.5 hours picking up those kids. And guys, that's just too long for them to be on the bus. So I talked to my special needs director at the time. John White was with KDE at the time. I talked to him. There was a little confusion on if a special needs child could be transported on a regular bus. And again, there's no regulation on that. If you have a child that is handicapped that needs a wheel lift, then obviously, I'm sorry, not a wheel lift, but a wheelchair lift, then obviously we have to use a handicap bus to accommodate that. Here in Crittenden County, we haven't had to run our handicap bus in about 5 or 6 years. We had a couple students in wheelchairs before that. One of those students graduated, the other one moved out of state, so we haven't had to use our wheelchair or handicap bus in several years. But we've got our special needs children, some of them with monitors. If they require transportation and require an assistant or a monitor, it'll be in their IEP. So we have to be sure we work with our special needs director and be sure that we know the IEP and the needs of that child and accommodate those needs. Again, we've got some districts that has to transport oxygen. Again, there's some regulations on that, but the handicap buses has been equipped with some of those holders to hold that oxygen tank. And so again, it's all about your district and what you can and can't do and what you need to do and don't need to do. in Crittenden County, it worked best for us to combine our students. And it's worked great the last 12 years. Checking shipping cost. You know, when I came here 13 years ago, one of my pet peeves was shipping cost. I run the trucking company over at Calvert City for a number of years, and my suppliers didn't charge me shipping. So when I came here, one of the things I saw was some enormous shipping costs getting parts in here. And I got my vendors and I said, look, guys, I want the price of my product to include shipping. So they said, well, make it go up a little bit. You know, at the end of the day, if I'm pricing a seat from 3 different vendors and it includes shipping to my door, whichever one's the cheapest for the same seat's the one I usually go with. So that's what we have there. I'm gonna go back. We had a question about, is a special needs child is transported on a regular bus, can they be coded a T5? Again, if that child has a need for transportation, and it may be that they have to have a monitor because of their daily assistance that they need, then they're a T5. Again, not all special needs children needs a monitor. It's about what's in their IEP. So if it's in their IEP that they have to have transportation, if that need can be met on a regular bus, they can be coded T5. If it cannot, then obviously maybe we need to use a special a handicap bus.
I can say a little bit more about that
Okay.
too. Other situations may be that the child can't sit around other people, so they need to have their individual seat. So you're saving, you have to have that seat available to that child every single day. That would be considered a T5 because as long as it's in their IEP, or you know, they need to sit in the front seat, or they need to sit specifically somewhere. You know, that seat has to be saved for that child every single day. So that would be considered something that could be considered for their IEP to allow them to ride on the regular bus. But as long as the special service has to do with their disability and it's in their IEP, then it can be added. Can be used as a T5. In addition, going back just a moment, I put the master agreement in the chat. That'll take you to the various master agreements that the state has. Go ahead, Wayne.
All right. Utilizing preschool grants. Again, some of our special needs students, it's in their IEP, they need an assistant or a monitor. So if we are transporting preschool students on the same bus, you need to be careful to make sure that you've got enough monitors on the bus to accommodate the need for that bus. But like we do, if we've got a couple preschool students and a special needs student, if the accommodations can be made for both, we use that monitor for both. Again, you just got to depend on your situation and where you're at. Checking the T codes in Infinite Campus. Again, guys, that's very important that your staff at your school is kind of monitoring that as we go. It's very important that you check that from year to year to see where we're at. I usually try to do it the second, third week of school. I try to make sure my T codes are in line with my driver sheets. So I'll go back and print out a book of T codes and I'll separate them by T1s through T5s. And then I'll try to go through my driver's student list, AM and PM, and make sure that my students are marked appropriately so that I don't have, for instance, a T1 that's actually marked a T3. The other thing we have to be careful of are sports. If we've got football players in the fall that start riding the bus in January, we need to be sure that we're watching that and making those changes when that's happening. So be sure we're watching that. One of the things I've also added on here about saving money is, do you sell your buses or do you scrap them? One of the things we have to think about when we get ready to have a bus that's the end of life, do we have more buses of that era? And when I say that, I mean, for instance, the over each entry door, there's an air cylinder that opens and shuts that door. Several years ago, I had just came here and we sold a bus through one of the programs that sells used buses. We got about $2,000 for the bus. It drove off the lot, went on its way. The next week, a sister bus to that one blew an air door actuator, and the air door actuator cost me $1,800. So I said then, we need to reevaluate our program. So what I did was try to look and see what we had. If we had a bus that was reaching the end of life and we had 2 or 3 other buses that same era, there's certain parts that you can reuse off a bus. For instance, parts I would not use would be steering and brake parts. I will not put used steering and brake parts on another bus. But the air door actuator, the emergency window items, the latches on the emergency doors, the seats, the glass, all those things could be reused if you needed to. The turbo, the alternator, those things could be reused if you needed to. So we started pulling a few parts off, adding it to an inventory in our shop. Then what was left of the bus, we took to the scrap yard. The year after, I got $2,000 for a bus. I stripped a bus, took it to the scrap yard, and got $1,900 for it. So it was a difference of $100, but I had that $1,800 air door actuator laying here, along with a $1,500, $2,000 turbo, along with a $200 or $300 alternator, and some other parts. You can kind of see where I'm going with that. So think about that as you're doing things. Does it make sense to hold a few parts off of a bus, or does it make sense to go ahead and sell it out at surplus? So think about that as you go. Next slide, please. Don't assume you're getting school pricing. Always ask. So be sure. One of the things when I came here, my local parts house, I went to them and I made sure what we could do there to start buying more parts from them. They got me set up on state pricing, reduced my price of filters and stuff considerably, and we used them for several years. So just because that's the place we've always purchased things doesn't mean you're getting the best price. Quality versus price. Again, guys, you got to be careful with that and be sure you're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges. My favorite saying is grade 8 bolts versus grade 5 bolts. When you're pricing bolts, be sure you're pricing the right bolts. Because if I'm buying grade 8 bolts for, I'm just going to throw a number out, $10 a pound. But somebody comes in and offers to sell me bolts for $5 a pound. Am I getting grade 8 or am I getting grade 5? So we just have to be careful when we're buying our parts. Next slide, please. So when we're doing field trips, purchasing, open purchase order for repair parts. Sometimes that's good for a district, depending on where you buy your parts. Again, get with your finance officer and see if that works for your district. It makes the life of the transportation director and the finance officer easier when you're buying parts. So if you know you're going to use, let's just say, for instance, your Napa store, and you've been buying $5,000 to $6,000 worth of parts a year from them, get you a blanket purchase order for them, and put on there $5,000 or $6,000, depending on what you think you're going to spend with them, and be sure again marking your receipts, tracking those to see where it is at the end of the year. Each month, you need to help match your receipts to your statements. That's one of the things here in Crittenden County. I pretty much do all the above. I wear a lot of hats, so I get to do all this stuff each month. So just be sure it matches up. A lot of districts or a lot of companies, when they send you a statement, it may not be what you got. There may have been a mistake somewhere. So it's important that you, first of all, your parts have arrived and you have them in hand before you submit them for payment. And it's important that you communicate, because a lot of times we may not see the statement. So get with your finance officer or your finance department, depending on your school, and be sure your receipts is matching your statements. Maybe you take all your receipts to your finance department and they do that for you. I don't know. But again, it depends on what your district does. Just be sure it's getting matched up to be sure you're paying the appropriate things after they get to your campus. Purchase order for bus repairs, and specifically which bus is it for. What I try to do when I call for a purchase order, and I'll give you for instance, Tri-State International is one of my bus repair shops that's local to us. I've got a purchase order for parts from them. That's an open purchase order. When I call and I have to take a bus to them, I will call my finance officer. I'll say bus 0523 is going to Tri-State International. I need a purchase order. The estimate's going to be $2,500. We get a purchase order. It's identified that 0523 has went to Tri-State International and maybe it needs a turbo. Okay, so I put on there that depending on what it goes for, just try to notate that so it's in the notation so you'll know. Be prepared to present arguments to the superintendent for bus replacements. You know, one of the biggest costs to a school district's transportation. One of the biggest costs to transportation is repairing buses. There becomes a point in time when that bus is not worth repairing any longer because it's costing you more to run it than it would cost you for a new bus and the outcome. So be sure that your superintendent's aware of those things. Be sure, again, they're aware of the depreciation funding, the 124% over 14 years. Be sure they're aware of all that. You can use capital outlay funds to purchase new buses. It says, can we? And the answer is yes, you can. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk about field trips for just a second. Be sure that when you are doing field trips that all things are considered. And when I say all things are considered, be sure driver pay while they're on the trip. Be sure that they're per diem. Be sure that you're getting your funding back for the fringes. And again, wage and hour has a little bit of effect on the amount of time the driver has to be paid when they're out on overnight trips. So be sure you're looking at all of that. Be sure that their fringes are included on the time that you charge for your field trips. And when the hours is all broke down, wage and hour says they must be paid at least minimum wage for their time. Here in Crittenden County, our drivers are paid by the hour, whether they're driving a bus during the day or whether they're driving a bus on a field trip. So that's the way we do it. A lot of our coaches here drive. And if our rule here in Crittenden County is if you are a paid coach and you drive a bus, your team doesn't have to pay when you drive the bus. So that's kind of the way we do it here. Now, if that coach drives for a different, let's say, for instance, our basketball coach drives a trip for FCCLA, then he gets paid as a driver when he's on that trip. So, but if they're driving the team or the group that they are a paid coach on, then we allow them to do that without taking money away from their team. Next slide, please. All right, the next one again is my grandson enjoying his tractor that we found the money to buy. And now we're ready for discussion. Next slide, please. If there's any questions, please, you're welcome to unmute and share. Lissa, if you've got anything you want to add or take away, please join in.
I just kind of wanted to recap for our finance officers. Our school buses are now computers, so just keep that in mind. So we do need to have the access to computers to be able to do those diagnostics in order for them to do it properly. In addition, those computers will help them be able to attend trainings that are our vendors provide. Some of them are for free to help them keep their skills up. Oftentimes we find that school districts are not sending their technicians to anything but the 4-hour update, and that really doesn't enhance their skills. It just gives them information. So to be able to provide our technicians and inspectors with additional training is really important, because them up to date with what is going on. But if they don't have access to the computers, they don't even have a clue really what's going on. In addition, they cannot get a hold of the new manuals. They cannot get a hold of forms. All of that is online these days. So just to keep that in mind. And so the next presentation that we'll have will be, we're thinking January, February timeframe. I'm going to try and get KEMI to talk to us about different things that have to do with training and insurance and a lot of things that we have not talked about yet this year. So I will send that out as soon as I receive it. And Wayne, if you have anything else you want to say?
I think we've pretty much covered it.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for presenting, Wayne. We greatly appreciate it. And you all have a wonderful holiday. Stay safe, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you.